friends, welcome back. This is Editing Stages Part 5, where I'm talking about the decor part of our house metaphor, if you want to call it that. So we will start off with sentences. It makes sense that you need sentences that make sense, because sentences make up paragraphs, which make up chapters, which make up your book. So if you don't have a logical sentence, that could be a problem. So if yours makes sense, congratulations. But there's something else you can do to make them even more powerful, and that is syntax. Syntax is basically just the order of words or phrases in a sentence. The most basic usage is arranging them to make them say what you want them to say. For example, Mary watched when the fight began at her window. Sounds like the fight took place right outside her window, doesn't it? Well, that might be what you want, but what if it's not? You can rearrange that sentence without adding or subtracting any words to mean something else, such as, Mary watched at her window when the fight began. So it makes it sound like the fight is happening across the street or something. And another usage of syntax is emphasizing details. I've been experimenting with this a lot in my editing, and it has been a lot of fun, to be honest. And here's a few examples of how I use syntax to emphasize certain details. So these are two sentences. One of them is from my book, and I'll leave you to guess which one it is. I might tell you later on. I don't know. Alright, so this is talking about a Viking war cry. The first sentence is, it was not the shout of triumphant defenders, but of vicious attackers. Number 2, it was the shout of vicious attackers, not of triumphant defenders. So you see how the order of things in the sentence really brings out some of the details? They're the same details, but the ones that are listed last are the ones that hit harder. For example, in the first sentence, it emphasizes the attackers and their victory, and in the second sentence, it emphasizes the loss of the defenders. So I like to play around with what I want to emphasize more in my sentences, and it is a lot of fun. And it's kind of like wordplay. It's really interesting. I recommend you try that. Take some of the sentences you wrote in your book and see if you can arrange them to emphasize different details or to mean something else that it wouldn't mean otherwise. And now that I went over all that, I will tell you which one I did. It was number 1, because I wanted to emphasize the attackers and their triumph and the defeat of the defenders. So, there you go. Now you have the answer to that. Alright, next we will talk about word choice. Words are even more essential to your book because that's what they're made up of. This is the mood that I've been in today, so I apologize if I come across as strange. So, I'm sorry. Alright, word choice. I don't know about you, but I love learning about new words. They add a spice to my vocabulary that I didn't have before. It's because each word has its own distinct flavor, and when they're put together, they create a new taste that you couldn't have by themselves. It's just like cooking, honestly. So I found that words with hard G's or hard CH's are really harsh. And the words with soft S's or M's or V's are softer. This is why clang, chime, bark, scowl are harsh. And I'm not really sure where harsh falls into. It sounds harsh. But then it also has the soft one, so depending on how you read it, it could come across as soft. But soft words are velvet, leaves, murmur, whisper. At least in my opinion. You might have your own opinion about some of these, and I'm totally up for that. And some words are casual, and some are formal. Some are aristocratic, some are friendly, good old common English. So you should take that into consideration also. You don't want to list off a huge list of crazy words. It's called purple prose if you use too many elaborate words in one sentence. It feels like rich icing on top of an already rich cake. It's kind of overwhelming, you know? So choose wisely. I love huge words. I love big, beautiful, bulky words, especially old ones that people normally don't use, but you can't cram them into one sentence. And trust me, I've tried. If you want to have me talk about purple prose in the future, I can do that. Just leave me a comment or a like, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. And I will see about making a purple prose video for you guys. It will be a lot of fun if I do. Alright, so back to word choice. Something I've seen a lot of new writers do, and I'm guilty of this before I kind of knew about it, is when they use words that don't fit with the setting. This applies to similes and metaphors too, but that's another topic. When writing historical fiction, for example, I like using that example because that's what I started writing with. Words should definitely be considered there because you need to think, would your characters use that word in that point of time, in that setting, in that formality? It isn't possible to use this technique all the time, especially if you're writing, I don't know, a Viking novel like I am. But try to think of ways to use the culture to be like a lens for your words and your similes and whatnot, because it'll add a nice flavor to it. What I don't like is when new authors just add a bunch of modern jargon and all that stuff to historical novels or fantasy where they don't fit. It pulls me out of the book, and it's like, it's really annoying. I don't know about you guys, but I find it annoying. So the way I did this in Out of the Dark, which is coming soon, I'm going to post an update soon. But in that book, I tried to use words that had an older etymology. For example, with the word docks, for the place where boats come up and the merchants kind of sell their stuff and whatnot. Instead of using docks, I used wharf because that has the feel that I want for my book, and it also has an older etymology. I especially liked using words that had Norse origins, and if you Google it, it's like insane. I think there's like 1 out of 10 words in our vocabulary are from Old Norse, and so I really liked to use those a lot. Alright, you ready for the next one? Speech tags. You may have been taught to replace said with more interesting words. This is not a bad thing because too many saids in one paragraph, in one word. I'm tired, can you tell? It's been a long day. Let me start over again. You may have been taught to use other words besides said in your writing. That's okay, because Using other words um, might help clarify your meaning more than the words said, like um, grumble or groan or shout do a much better job than said. But you don't want too many saids in a row, because that is also aggravating. Because I've read so many children's books where it's just he said, she said, he said, she said, over and over again, and I'm just ready to tear out my hair because it's so repetitive. Said, if it's used properly, blends into the narrative, and so that's why I like to use it. But then when I want more clarification, I will use a different word. Another way of doing things is to have an action beat. And this is a great technique to break up all those saids and speech tags and everything. And it helps clarify things when tone is not really necessary, but it does bring out more of an emotion to the story. I hope all that was clear. I feel like what I have in my head, it's all laid out nicely. I'm even looking at my blog post as I go along, but once it comes out of my mouth, it just does not make sense anymore. I'm sorry. But here's some examples to show what I mean. The first one is, "Where's Jenkins?" he yelled. That's good. If you had put, "Where's Jenkins?" he said, that wouldn't have packed as much of a punch as yelled. This is fine using he yelled. You can also use he pounded the desk. Where's Jenkins? So you kind of get a sense of what he's doing, like how he's saying it, and you can also imagine him pounding on the desk, being like, "Where is Jenkins?" And so I like using that too. But you can also combine them and say, he pounded on the desk and yelled, "Where's Jenkins?" I like doing that too. So all of these depend on your circumstance, what your book needs, what would be most useful for the narrative. Alright, paragraph usage. This is something I haven't really thought through until recently when I read something. I forget where I read it, but someone was talking about the importance of paragraph usage. And so there are specific times when grammar commands us to create a new paragraph. When a new speaker is talking, and when the topic changes. Now, some authors put several speakers in the same paragraph, but this is for a humoristic effect and should be used sparingly. An example of this would be in the Chronicles of Narnia. Lewis does this, I think, 2 times. I've only noticed 2. That just goes to show how well he does it. It's like, it blends in really well. And he only used it when several people are interjecting. And so, I would follow his example in that. Unfortunately, I cannot find any examples because, like I said, he used it only once or twice. So you'll just have to believe me that he did it, or read the books yourself, all 7 of them, and find them. I recommend you read the books because they're so good, but you can possibly Google it. I don't know. But here's an example of paragraph usage from my book. So what I did here is using paragraphs to indicate the importance of a topic. Now, if you want your readers to be struck by a certain thought, for example, it is better to put the thought in its own paragraph instead of in the middle or in the end. And it will just stand out better that way. It's kind of like using syntax, but for paragraphs. It might be called syntax, but I've only heard that term being applied to sentences, but you know. Alright, this is a paragraph from my book, Out of the Dark. It may have been edited since then, since I wrote this post, but I'm just going to share it as it is. So, Esther decked low, heart pounding. Everything suddenly makes sense. These were the men behind Erlin's attack. Higgs' part in it didn't surprise her, not after his temptation to steal the key, then taking it himself. Even so, he burned beneath her face and in her chest. She shook herself. Someone had to know. Erlin. Get Erlin. And so, hopefully you saw how I used the next line, the very, very, very short paragraph, to change thoughts and to make it seem more like stand out more. Alright, so these are all techniques you can use, and as long as you're obeying grammar rules, there's no hard and fast way to use these techniques. They're like paint, like decor, furniture in a house. When, where, how often, and to what extent you use them depends on your style and the need of the book. A great way to learn to use them is to read other authors' works and observe how they use them. With every book I read, I learn something else. And the great thing about learning from other authors is that you can pick and choose, like, ooh, I like how he did that, and I like how she did that. You put them together, and that's when it becomes your own. And that's how you find your own author's voice, is making your own style based on what you love and what works. And so, I would encourage you to play with these and find your own preferences. And yeah, just see what happens. It is a lot of fun. So, thank you guys so much again for watching, and I will see you next time. Hopefully in 2 weeks. I've been really busy editing, and I'm sorry it took so long to do this post. It's been crazy. Alright, next time I'm going to go over how you could possibly use these techniques and stuff. All of the edit stages that I went through in this series, I'm going to go over them in a hopefully concise post and kind of lay out how I might do it. So, I hope to see you there. Bye.